Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the first session for morphology and syntax class. Before we talk further, I think it is better if we get flashback, if we review the course that we had last semester. Yes, you came to the class of phonetics and phonology last semester. What is phonetics, everybody? Phonetics is a discussion about the production, the transfer, and the perceptions of language sounds. But because of the very limited time, last semester we only talk about the productions of language sounds. We talk about the productions of consonants, vowels, and diphthongs, which are called segmental sounds. Besides talking about segmental sounds, we also talk about suprasegmental features, namely stress, length, syllabic structure, and pitch, which comprise tone and intonation. They are called suprasegmental features or prosody, the things accompanying the pronunciations of segmental sounds. We never talk about the meaningfulness of the sound in phonetics. When we talk about the meaningfulness of the sounds, we are no longer in the area of phonetics. We are already in the area of phonology. The keyword of phonetics is speech sounds and also prosody. Okay, we never talk about the meaning. And then the keyword of morphology, the keyword of phonology is phoneme. What is phoneme? It is the meaningful sound. So when the sound becomes a certain word becomes different from other words because of the distinctive sound. I hope what I told you just now can refresh your mind. Can you get flashback to our course last semester? Because the knowledge of phonetics and phonology will be very needed when we talk about morphology and syntax later. Now let's come to our course this semester, morphology and syntax. We are going to talk about morphology before the mid-test, and we are going to talk about syntax after the mid-test. Okay, now let's get focused on morphology. What is morphology? Simply, morphology can be defined as the discussions about word structure. If I had to relate morphology to phonetics and phonology, so I would like to define morphology as a discussion about how language sounds are used to construct words in a certain language. Okay? Again, morphology is dealing with how words are structured, how words are made, how words are constructed. Before we talk further, so we have to get clear insight to what is meant by word. If you read books on morphology, if you read books on introduction to morphology, you will find the explanation that the definitions of word is not that easy to define. The explanations of word will never satisfy you. But of course, we have to get clear insight, clear concept of what is meant by word. Let's discuss based on the readings that I have done. word can be explained as the smallest grammatical unit that can be moved around in a sentence. For example, let's take an example, an English word, often. Often can occur in a sentence, in an English sentence, like I often go to the cinema, for example. Let's focus on the word often. Besides can occur between I and go, like in I often go to the cinema. Often can also occur in the initial positions of a sentence, like often I go to the cinema. Besides, often can also occur at the final positions of a sentence. I go to the cinema often. You can see that the word often can be moved around in a sentence. Let's come to Indonesian language. For example, let's focus on the word ikan. Ikan can occur at the final positions of a sentence, such as in saya makan ikan. Meanwhile, ikan can also occur in the initial position of a sentence, like ikan saya makan. Besides, ikan can also occur in the initial position with the different sequence of the other words after that. For example, ikan makan saya, with different intonation, of course. Okay, now you know that we are dealing with intonation. What the concept that we discussed in the previous semester. Okay, that is one of the characteristics of word. It can be moved around in a sentence. When we are talking about word, there is also a dichotomy of phonological word versus orthographic word. I will say you an utterance in English. Listen to my utterance and then please answer my question. How many words are there in my utterance? Are you ready? Listen carefully. The doll is on the table. How many words are there? For the very beginner of English learners, so perhaps they will get confused. How many words? Okay, the utterance of Pak Fauzi is not clear enough. Okay, but for you who are already in the high level of English proficiency, okay. So let me repeat Pak Fauzi's sentence in slow pace. The doll is on the table. Okay. But I'm sure that English speaker, the native speaker, will never say the doll is on the table. But the native speaker tend to say it as the doll is on the table. Okay. So you know that the doll is on the table consists of the doll is on the table. So it consists of 6 words. Because you are already familiar with the what you call that orthographic forms of the words. Okay? You know the doll is on the table. So there are 6 orthographic words. So it is dealing with the written form. But let's get back to the concept of phone. The doll is on the table. For example, how many words are there? For those who do not do not have knowledge about English would say, I don't know, saya tidak tahu. Ya, saya dengarnya hanya satu ucaran. Yes. The doll is on the table is a single phonological word. When I say the doll is on the table, it means that it consists of two phonological words. When I say the doll is on the table, so it consists of three phonological words. Okay. Now you can go over the books. You can check the internet. You can Google it. The dichotomy between phonological words versus orthographic words. Okay? Yeah, I will give you assignments after this, dealing with phonological words versus orthographic words. Okay, we already talked about the concept of word is the smallest grammatical unit that can be moved around a sentence. So we also have to pay attention to the concept of phonological word versus orthographic words. And then the definition or the concept of word can be explained by the explanation that word is the smallest, word is the biggest unit, the biggest entity that cannot be interrupted. Let's take an example of English word developments. You know the word developments, right? The word developments consists of developments. You cannot change it. You cannot change into development. You cannot change it into development. You cannot change it into develop or develops. It should be developments. The Indonesian word melakukan should be melakukan, not kan melaku or laku mekan or kan melaku. It should be melakukan. So it is the biggest entity that cannot be reinterrupted. And then when we are talking about word, we have to pay attention to the explanation that a word can consist of a root. An example is book or teach. And then a word can consist of one root plus another element. For example, books. It consists of root book plus another element. Or booking. Okay, it consists of one root, book, and another element in. Teach is an example of a word consists of one root. Teacher is an example of a word consisting of one root plus another element. Teach is the root, and then is another element. A root can also consist of one root plus some other elements. For example, teachers. Teachers consist of teach as the root, and us as other elements. Bookings is an example of a word consisting of one root plus some other elements. The other elements are ing and us. Again, I'm telling you, a word can consist of one root, for example, book, teach, it can consist of one root plus another element like booking, like teacher. It can consist of one root plus some other elements, for example, bookings or teachers, developmental. Okay, yeah. We already come to the concept of root. Now, what is root? Okay, when we are talking about root, we also have to talk about stem and base. What is root? Root is a reducible element of words. Okay, it cannot be reduced again. Teachers consist of elements. What are they? Teach, and us. Teacher consists of two elements, teach and teach. So how many elements has it got? Teach cannot be reduced anymore. So it is a irreducible element of words. So it is called root. Okay. What is root? So in Indonesian language, Indonesian linguists translate root into bentuk dasar, or you can say kata dasar, but I use bentuk dasar. Now let's come to the idea of stem and base, and I think let me give you an example of an English word, teachers. Okay, the word teachers is made by doing teach plus becomes teacher, and then teacher plus us becomes teachers. Okay, let me give you an example in Arabic. You know the form of hajaro. Okay, hajaro plus mim becomes muhajir. Muhajir plus ya-nun becomes muhajirin. Okay, so muhajir, hajaro is the reducible element, so it is called root. Like teach is a reducible element, it is called root. Teach is the root for teacher, and it is also the root for teachers. Okay, hajaro is the root for muhajir, and hajaro is also the root for muhajirin. Okay, now let's talk about base. Teacher is the root for teacher and also the root for teachers. Teach is the root for teacher and also the base for teacher. Teach is the root for teachers but not the base for teachers. The base for teachers is teacher. You get the point? Let's come back to the examples in Arabic. Hajaro is the root for muhajir. Hajaro is also the root for muhajirin. Hajaro, besides become the root for muhajir, it is also the base for muhajir. But the base for muhajirin is not hajaro but muhajir. Do you get the point? So what is base? Base is a form from which the bigger form is derived. Okay. Besides root and base, there is stem. What is stem? Stem is a base of bigger element, and it should consist of root plus another element. Let's come back for teacher. Teachers, okay, teach is the root for teacher. The root for teachers. Teach besides become the root for teacher, also becomes the base for teacher. Teach is the base, is the root for teachers, but not the base for teachers, but because the base for teachers is teacher. Besides become the base for teachers, teacher is the stem. Why? Because it becomes the the base for bigger element, and it consists of root plus another element, teach plus er. But teach is only the root and the base, but it is not stem, because the definition of stem is root plus another element, and it can become the base for the bigger form. Let's come back to the Arabic form. Muhajirin, okay, hajaro is the root for muhajir and also the root for muhajirin. Hajaro, besides become the root for muhajir, it also become the base for muhajir. But the base for muhajirin is not hajaro, but muhajir. Muhajir is the stem. Why? Because it is root plus another element. The root is hajaro plus mim. Okay. Hajaro is not stem because it is a root. Muhajir is a stem. Okay. Well, everybody, let me summarize what we are talking today. So we are talking about the characteristic of word. The word can be explained as the smallest grammatical unit that can be moved around a sentence. Dealing with phonetics and phonology, we have to pay attention to the concept or the dichotomy of phonological word versus orthographic words. And then when we are talking about word, there is an important concept which is called root. A word can be defined as an element that can consist of one root, or root plus another element, or root. A word can consist of one root only. A word can consist of one root plus another element, or a word can consist of a word can consist of one root plus some other elements. When we are talking about root, we also have to talk about stem, base and stem. Well, everybody, I think that's enough for today. So we can continue the notions, other notions that we have to talk about in morphology next sessions. For the time being, that's all. See you again next week for further discussion of morphology. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.